Ritchie was saving. He avoided big expenses. He considered himself responsible with money. And yet, at the end of every month, something was always missing, and he couldn't really figure out why. He thought financial problems happened to impulsive people, to disorganized people, not to him. He was careful. He was responsible. And yet, it wasn't enough. The real problem wasn't the obvious big mistakes. It was habits he repeated every week, thinking he was doing the right thing. And that's exactly what was costing him the most. Today, we're going to look at the 7 mistakes Ritchie was making, and that even careful people make. For each one, a concrete fix you can apply this week. Ritchie spends way too much time figuring out why some people build wealth, while others stay stuck, even with a good income. If his story sounds familiar, hit subscribe. We start with mistake number 1, and this one surprises a lot of people, because it's probably something Ritchie was doing every week, thinking he was on the right track. Mistake number 1. Ritchie thought he knew exactly where his money was going. No major out-of-control expenses, no big impulse purchases, just small things. And that's precisely where everything was happening. He estimated his monthly expenses roughly: rent, car, groceries. He felt in control. But a Federal Reserve study shows that most households underestimate their discretionary spending by several $100s every month. Why? Because small purchases don't feel important in the moment. $8 coffee, $14 delivery, $12 subscription. Individually, nothing alarming, but together they add up extremely fast. Spending $15 a day on small purchases is $450 a month, $5,400 a year. Invested annually at an 8% return, those $5,400 a year become over $250,000 in 20 years. These aren't small expenses. This is future wealth. The fix is simple. Ritchie tracked his spending for 7 days, not a full month, just 1 week, and he discovered patterns he had never noticed before. That's all it took for the numbers to become real. Knowing where the money goes is the starting point. But Ritchie was making a second mistake, and this one he was making precisely because things were getting better. Ritchie got a raise. $800 more a month. He was relieved. Finally, some room. Finally, a chance to breathe financially. And then, without really noticing, he started spending differently. A slightly bigger apartment, a slightly better car, restaurants a bit more often. Nothing extravagant. Just small, reasonable upgrades. 6 months later, his bank account looked exactly like it did before the raise. This phenomenon is called lifestyle inflation, and it affects almost everyone. A Bureau of Labor Statistics study shows that household spending rises almost proportionally with income growth. The numbers get bigger. The situation stays exactly the same. If Ritchie had redirected just half of that raise, $400 a month, into savings invested at 8%, he would have built nearly $240,000 over 20 years. Instead, he had a slightly better car and a slightly more expensive apartment. The rule Ritchie learned: when income goes up, raise the savings rate first, not the lifestyle. Even directing 50% of every raise into savings can radically transform long-term finances. Ritchie now had better visibility on his spending. He was slowing down his lifestyle inflation, but he was still carrying something that was working against him quietly. Every month, without exception, Ritchie had $4,200 on his credit card. Not because of one crazy purchase, just ordinary expenses that had built up over several months. He was paying the minimum amount due every month and thought he had it under control. He had nothing under control. The average credit card interest rate in the United States is now over 20%, which means that $4,200 in debt generates over $840 in interest every year. Money that disappears without buying anything, without getting anything in return. That's when Ritchie understood something fundamental. Investing at 8% builds wealth slowly. A debt at 20% destroys it fast. Compound interest can work for you, or exactly against you. It's the same mechanism. By only paying the minimum on his $4,200, he would have taken over 15 years to pay off that debt, and paid nearly $5,000 in additional interest, almost double the original amount, for purchases he had already consumed long ago. The immediate fix: stop using the credit card for purchases that can't be paid off this month, and direct every available dollar toward paying down the debt before thinking about investing. You don't fill a leaking bucket. Ritchie was paying down his debt, tracking his spending, slowing his lifestyle inflation. He was finally doing the right things. Except he was missing one essential thing, and that omission was costing him a little more every year. He wanted to invest. He was convinced of it. But he was waiting until he felt more stable first, until his debt was paid, until he had better visibility. There was always a good reason to wait just a little longer. Here's what that delay was actually costing him. 2 people. Same monthly investment of $200. Same 8% annual return. The only difference: one starts at 25, the other waits until 35. At 65, the one who started at 25 has $700,000. The one who waited until 35 has $300,000. Same monthly effort. Same return. Just 10 years apart. It's time, not amount, that builds wealth. Waiting is not a neutral position. It's an active decision not to let time work. Every month without investing is a month of compound growth lost forever. The right moment doesn't exist. There's only now. Ritchie started with $50 a month, nothing more. The goal wasn't the amount, it was the habit. Because once the system is in place and automated, increasing the amount becomes natural. The first step is always the most valuable. He had started investing. Small amounts, but consistently. Except he had overlooked something essential. Without this one protection in place, the first emergency that came along could wipe everything out at once. Ritchie's life was moving in the right direction. Then one morning, his car wouldn't start. Repair estimate: $1,100. He opened his banking app. His savings account showed $340. This wasn't an exceptional catastrophe. It was just normal life. And, according to a Bankrate report, a majority of Americans can't cover a $1,000 unexpected expense without going into debt. Ritchie was one of them. Without emergency savings, the repair went on the credit card. At 20% interest, which means his ongoing investments kept growing at 8%, while a 20% debt was building up in parallel. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Financial planners generally recommend 3 to 6 months of expenses in liquid savings. But if that number feels out of reach, Ritchie's immediate goal was simpler: $1,000 in cash. Just enough so that life couldn't sabotage his finances. The fix: open a separate savings account dedicated exclusively to emergencies, never touched for anything else, and automatically transfer $50 a week until it reaches $1,000. This account doesn't earn much. It protects, which is worth far more. Ritchie now had a safety net. His investments could work without being threatened by everyday surprises. But he still had one belief that was holding him back. A belief about small amounts. He had a deeply held belief. Setting aside $50 a month wouldn't make any difference. Not at his scale. Not with his goals. To make a real impact, he thought you needed big amounts. Or nothing. Here's what the numbers actually said. $50 a month. 8% annual return. Over 30 years. Result? Roughly $70,000. Not enough to retire on, but certainly not nothing either. And what if Ritchie moved up to $200 a month? Same return, same time frame. The result became $300,000. Not because of a lucky break, not because of a brilliant investment, just because of a repeated behavior. That's when Ritchie understood something fundamental. Wealth is almost never built in one big decision. It's built through hundreds of small choices repeated every month. Consistency always beats amount. Ritchie's fix: stop waiting until he had enough to start. Begin with whatever is possible right now. $25, $50, $100. It doesn't matter. And increase that amount whenever the situation allows. The habit always comes before the amount. He was saving consistently. He was investing. He was protecting his finances. But he was still missing one piece, the most structural of all. Without it, everything else remained fragile and dependent on his daily willpower. Ritchie had good intentions. Every month, he told himself, he'd save whatever was left over, pay his bills, manage his expenses, and set aside the surplus. The problem: there was never much left. The problem with this approach: it relies entirely on willpower. And willpower is a limited resource. Busy days, stress, fatigue, they erode the best intentions. A well-designed system, on the other hand, never gets tired. The solution, Ritchie discovered: automate before spending. As soon as his paycheck arrives, an automatic transfer goes to savings. One goes to investing. What's left is what he can spend. The system decides before willpower is even called upon. Automation is powerful for one simple reason. It removes the decision. No motivation needed on the first of the month. No need to remember. The money moves before Ritchie has a chance to spend it elsewhere. Ritchie's system: the 50-30-20 rule. 50% for essential needs. 30% for personal spending. 20% automatically redirected to savings and investing on payday before any other expense. Ritchie now had all 7 fixes in place. No radical overnight transformation, just precise adjustments, built one after another. And something had fundamentally changed in the way he managed his money. At the start, Ritchie thought he was doing fine. He saved a little. He avoided big expenses. He considered himself responsible. But he was making 7 mistakes in silence, and each one was costing him future wealth every single month. He wasn't tracking his spending. He let his lifestyle inflate with his income. He carried debt at 20%. He waited for the right moment to invest. He had no safety net. He underestimated small amounts, and he relied on willpower alone. What Ritchie understood. Most financial problems don't come from a lack of income. They come from small, repeated habits, invisible ones, that even responsible people allow to take hold. Awareness always comes before change. He didn't fix everything overnight. He picked one correction per week. Track spending first, then automate savings, then pay down debt. Small adjustments, one at a time. That's all it took for everything to shift. Ritchie wasn't a special case. He is exactly like most people who feel stuck financially. Not for lack of ambition, not for lack of effort. Just because no one had shown him these 7 mistakes before. If this video resonated, subscribe. Ritchie still has a lot of mistakes to fix. And tell us in the comments, which of these 7 mistakes hits closest to home for you right now? Because sometimes naming the problem is already the beginning of solving it.